Here's a question that every advisor should ask in every client review. And the question is, Dave, let me ask you and your wife, what do you believe we've achieved together in the 13 years we've worked together? Like, that's a really simple question. It's an achievement question. What do you believe we've achieved together? Now, if the client can't answer that question, the advisor's in trouble.
Welcome, Model FAs. David DeSell here, president of Model FA and your host of the Model FA podcast. Particularly excited about our guest today, Ray Sclafani. And part of the reason is, number one, I've admired him and his team and his company from afar for quite some time now. But also number two is, on the surface, when you look at both of our companies, one would consider us competitors, to be quite frank. So it's always good to collaborate and have some healthy competition. So excited to have him on the show today. So Ray, whom many of you probably already know, he's, after 20 years as an executive with a leading asset management company, AllianceBernstein, he founded ClientWise in 2006. And today leads a team of professionals who work exclusively with financial professionals, just like you and your team and everyone listening today. ClientWise has worked extensively for a number of years with many of the top advisors at Northwestern Mutual, which is the firm that I spent 7 years at. And in fact, in January of 2018, Ray decided to sell a majority stake of his company to Northwestern. And ClientWise remains an independent and objective firm even throughout that process. They will continue to grow its client base outside of Northwestern, serving a lot of independent advisors as well, and top advisors and industry leaders. This outside-in perspective will only serve their organization for decades to come. Ray and his leadership team are currently in discussions to talk about how to best support teams in the future and how they can more effectively help you build durable, profitable, and sustainable wealth management businesses that maximize enterprise value for the benefit of others. One of the coaching programs ClientWise has created is Business Builders for Emerging Leaders, Master Leaders, and Enterprise Leaders. And I'm sure we'll talk about some of that throughout our call today. You should also know that ClientWise is, in fact, one of the largest business and executive coaching firms working exclusively with high-performing financial advisory teams. Ray is sought out by industry leaders for his expertise as a speaker, best-selling author, and a professional certified coach. If I'm not mistaken, all your coaches on your team, have that coaching designation. And that's a credential he earned from the International Coach Federation. And he also holds a master's certification in Neuro-Linguistics. He lives in Flower Mound, Texas with his wife and true life partner, Beth. And Ray, with that, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dave. Great to be here with you.
Love it. I know this has been a while in the making. Both have busy calendars, so glad that we were able to set aside some time together. And I'm going to pick your brain and have you drop some knowledge. But before we get into some of the topics that we discussed when we had a previous call, just give us a sense of some of your backstory. So you're at AllianceBernstein to start on the asset management side. And then you had sort of this aha moment where you wanted to transition, get into the consulting and coaching side of the business. So tell me a little bit about your career at Alliance and what led to you making this shift.
Sure. Happy to do that. For me, I've always enjoyed and admired what advisors do. I was the first half of my career in the field calling on advisors as a field wholesaler. I covered Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Kansas, Louisiana, Tennessee, always Texas, and based in Dallas. And I enjoyed that work very, very much. In fact, as a young professional, I think I was 26 when I was in that wholesaling game. Frankly, I didn't know a lot about the capital markets and the investment solutions as much as I enjoyed helping advisors build businesses. So I think at the core, that was always really central for me. I wrote a number of programs, tight-fisted telephone techniques and rapport building for the modern financial consultant, and SOS seminar on how to give effective seminars And as a young professional, I would go around to the top advisors and simply ask, how are you so successful? How are you finding new clients? How are you serving clients? So I think at the heart of what made me so successful as a wholesaler for an asset management company was simply helping advisors grow their businesses and serve clients more effectively. I was pretty good at that. And Alliance asked me to move back to New York, where I was originally from, and start a bank channel for the firm, lead the RIA channel, the independent advisor channel. I moved into other roles as responsible for key accounts and marketing. And frankly, as the more and more I recognized that we helped advisors succeed, the more our firm grew its assets. And we built trust with advisors. And frankly, I really enjoyed that a great deal. I got to travel around with a number of top advisors at Bernstein at the time. We built an acquisition model that we rolled out to all of our clients, modeling what the best at Bernstein had been doing effectively, calling on attorneys and CPAs. And the more and more I did that, Dave, I just, sometimes you find that passion in your life. You're like, hey, I love the investment piece. I see that as a little bit of a commoditization taking place in the marketplace, a compression on fees, a compression on those margins. And advisors who were committed to building great businesses were really looking for help in that space. And I started looking at the demographics and the aging of the advisor and recognizing the nobility of the profession, which we'll talk a little bit more about. To me, it felt like what a beautiful opportunity to help advisors scale and grow. And other than strategic coach, my good friend Dan Sullivan and his wife Babs, I was in strategic coach for a number of years, kept saying, well, then go do something about it. Be an entrepreneur, help advisors in some way. It was, I think, with their encouragement and the encouragement of Mark Tabersian, who's a mentor and good friend, I decided to step out on my own. It's now 16 years ago, and build a ClientWise company. I didn't want to build a Ray coaching company. Mm-hmm. I wanted to model for advisors how to build an enduring firm. And to do that, I was going to need a team. To do that, I was going to need a long-term partner. To do that, I was going to need to remain an entrepreneur and develop a next-gen set of talent with whom I could transition the business. So that was the embarking upon that journey. January of 2006, I resigned after 20 years and 2 days and made the transition over to be the founder of this great company, ClientWise.
So what'd you do? You waited till your 20-year anniversary gift arrived and then you decided to leave?
I did. Yeah. Magical things happen when you're more than 10 years as a partner, under 40 years of age, and a 20-year LOS. So that was a good, important milestone for me.
Love it. There's a lot of similarities in there. It's cool to hear because, as I mentioned in the intro, I've known about you since, my work at Northwestern, have, always admired you from afar. And
thank you.
Your chapters ahead of where at, but it's cool to hear some of those similarities. Like when I left being an advisor, it was for similar reasons where I ran a team at Northwestern of our new advisors that joined the firm. And whenever I would meet with them and compare that to meeting with clients, I was just like, I like this way more. I like working with the advisors way more. It's also cool to hear how, as a wholesaler, your business grew not through necessarily your main way in which you're compensated, which is getting advisors to utilize your products and services, but to truly help them in growing their business and increasing your value proposition on things that, quite frankly, you weren't compensated to do, but people are attracted to that when they see that you have a vested interest and you're not just around trying to, huck various products and whatnot. And seeing the foresight that you've had in creating ClientWise and not creating Ray coaching. So it actually is something that has enterprise value beyond you.
That's
when
right.
You eventually sunset, down the road is pretty cool to see as well. So when we were talking, and you kind of just alluded to this, you mentioned, one of the topics that I'm really interested in is the topic of advancing industry thinking around the nobility of our profession. Tell me more about that and what you mean by that.
Yeah, simply put, it's the ripple effect. It is when an advisor makes a difference in the life of one client, they have a ripple effect multi-generationally for that family, for that client. And in all the years that I've served to help advisors in the way that I have, the one thing that I've admired most about the very best in our business is that they are fully committed to making that multi-generational impact. And Really good financial planning, really a strong focus around financial security. If you think about spelling fiduciary with a capital F, not a little f, then you're really thinking about the endurance of the business beyond founder or controlling owner. And that ripple effect not only drives enterprise value when you do it well, but that ripple effect also makes a really difference in transforming entire communities. So the advisors that we've observed that are the most successful are really thinking about four big questions, and we can dig into that, but it's, hey, what is your time to exit? What do you want that transition to look like? To whom do you plan on selling the business? And what do you want to extract in terms of enterprise value? So when we think about nobility of the profession, the advisors and firms that are fully focused, not on necessarily lifestyle practice, but also focused on what it looks like to be able to serve those clients multi-generationally. Wow, that ripple effect is truly noble and is a pretty big deal.
So I'd like to get your thoughts on something. I'm going to riff for a minute or two to try and get this stuff out of my brain over to you and kind of see what your thoughts are. So I find that there's a lot of advisors that a lot of times really just focus on asset management, and they don't touch insurance all that much, or as much as perhaps I think, they could. And then on the other side of the industry, perhaps you have folks that are maybe too focused on insurance and not as much on financial planning and gathering the assets of their clients. And I don't know how well you know the name Dan Allison, who's on our team and speaks to his referral marketing strategy over the last 20 years. I don't remember the math, so I'm not going to try and attempt to do that. But basically, he had said in relation to that, some of that generational planning, that oftentimes your client's assets will get depleted over time, not just with the normal distributions in retirement, but by not insuring their life and not insuring any potential long-term care needs, which kind of puts a stop to really any generational opportunities for their family and, of course, your business. And his idea is that when you properly do financial planning, include the insurances, not only are you most likely doing the right thing for that family as you look beyond that client into the younger generations, but you're also increasing your enterprise value, because a potential buyer is going to want to make sure that those relationships are pretty sticky and those assets are protected in that sense. And I have another client, his name's Alan, out of Seattle, because one of the questions that advisors have is, well, how do I engage that next, generation, especially if I'm working with a 40-year-old who has younger kids. And my client, Alan, actually went as far as to create a children's book about financial planning in an easy way to understand. And I think it's genius because he's starting to, in a softer way, kind of build a relationship with these next generation. So just kind of throwing a couple ideas out there. Sure. But I guess my question is, what do you think about those ideas? And then parlay into what are other ways that advisors can actually focus on that generational planning for the families that they serve, that you've heard and that you've helped your clients with?
Yeah, it's a good thought. A number of good thoughts there. I think about it this way, Dave. There's a number of shifts that have occurred over the past 5 and 10 years in financial services. And I think when you pay attention closely to the shifts that are taking place in the marketplace, whether that's, the robo, entering the world, the discount brokeraging, zero commissions, when you think about what Schwab and Fidelity are doing on their platforms and serving clients directly, and you pay close attention to margin compression, we're now watching closely inflation and the operating leverage inside these businesses. It's getting trickier. I always go back to a very simple way of thinking about this. And it's, what does the client need and want? And where is the intersection of what value advisors can bring to what clients need and want? And the intersection of those two is about value creation. When I zoom out and look at what does the certified financial planning, designation teach us about the pillars of financial planning? What does the Investment and Wealth Institute teach us in their Chartered Private Wealth Advisor designation, which is like CFP on steroids? When we think about what clients need and want, it's as much about financial security. It's about retirement income distribution strategies. It's about wealth transfer. It's about the psychology of wealth and the impact that that wealth will have on their children and their grandchildren? And how do we prepare heirs? And you think about advisors that are solely focused on investment management as their value proposition. I think they're finding that the room's getting darker and the walls are closing in just a bit. That managing money is good and there's value in the managing of investment portfolios, but the democratization of what's happening in the marketplace around information flow and the advent of blockchain and digital assets and crypto. I mean, there's so much to know in running a diversified portfolio, niching yourself as a value money manager or a growth money manager or constructing an asset allocation strategy and focusing on asset location, not just asset allocation. Those are all really good concepts, but isn't that just one sleeve of what clients really need? That when we think about retirement, and I've been involved in working with Steve Gresham and his organization and thinking about the next chapter, when we think about retirement, it's exactly what you talked about, which is, oh my gosh, I'm going to be a caretaker for somebody that's, an elderly parent or grandparent, or long-term care is kind of an issue, or how do we fund, childcare? How do we use permanent life insurance? How do we pay attention to cash value? My goodness, what does the bank rate on our mortgage look like today? And how do we refinance, or when do we refinance? We may be beginning as we speak a new 40-year cycle in the bond market and what rising interest rates look like, because we've lived so long with low interest rates. So clients need protection. They need financial security. They need a real attentive plan that they've co-created in partnership with somebody. So my take is the advice and guidance that we see among the best in the business is more centered around helping the clients get what they need and want, which is more around that financial security piece, which begins with a solid plan, whether you're compensated for banking services or insurance services or estate planning services or mitigating taxes, which is going to be a bigger deal in the next decade, especially when we're looking at our debt service as a country. I think it's good we're helping Ukraine. I think it's great that our country stepped up and helped people during COVID. All of that comes at a cost. And that cost trickles down to all of us paying taxes into the large pool. And so clients thinking about ways to have more tax efficient portfolios and a better tax management strategy, like all of this value creation that an advisor can provide, serves up, whether we want to call that underneath the umbrella of financial planning or not, is going to be central to retaining clients and connecting to the next generation of clients. So I'm on board with what you're describing. I think we've got to help advisors more so think about the shifts taking place in the industry. And if they're building a multi-generational business, an enduring firm, then they've got to start thinking about what does the next 5 and 7 years ahead look like, and how can they strategically position their business so that they can take advantage of what the opportunity is going to be. A simple SWOT analysis will tell you there are key opportunities in the marketplace to add more value. Clients will pay for advice. They'll pay for guidance. And for a long time, we've been collecting a fee on AUM. I remember the big move from brokerage and transactional compensation to fee on AUM compensation. I think there's going to be a reckoning in the next decade where clients are recognizing that fee on AUM, man, you're providing what services? You're managing my money. Okay, I can do that at 5 and 10 and 30 basis points. Do I need to do that at 100 or 150 basis points? Well, wait a minute. If you're providing all these other planning services for the delta between what I can get on investment management and the 150, well, then just charge me, a retainer fee, charge me like another professional organization might, an attorney or a CPA. So I think there's going to be a shift taking place in some way, and advisors want to be thinking about their value creation in new and different ways.
Well, I think what's cool about what you said too is, a lot of advisors that we work with, one of the objections that we help them overcome is, some years they're going to beat the market that they're being judged against. Other years they're not. And clients, can sometimes latch on to what was the performance like? What was my rate of return like? And when you expand upon your value proposition, I think it becomes less around the actual performance and more about the experience and the value that advisor
100%
is adding above and beyond that.
Here are two things for advisors to consider, Dave. One of them is, here's a question that every advisor should ask in every client review. And the question is, Dave, let me ask you and your wife, what do you believe we've achieved together in the 13 years we've worked together? Like, that's a really simple question. It's an achievement question. What do you believe we've achieved together? Now, if the client can't answer that question, the advisor's in trouble. For most clients, if they haven't anchored those achievements to the value that the advisor has brought forward in the relationship, they're going to question the fee every time. Mm-hmm. This is a funny industry where advisors get compensated based upon what the client brings to the relationship, not necessarily the value that the advisor provides to the client. I mean, not all advisors, but if you're only fee on AUM, yeah, you get paid more based upon what the client brings to the relationship, more assets, as opposed to where your value creation lies. So I think the achievement question is an important one. And in fact, every advisor should probably have prepared an answer to that question to jog the client's memory in the event the client kind of stumbles a little bit. For example, hey, we retitle all your beneficiary designations. We updated and rebalanced some of the asset allocation in your 401k. We actually met with the kids and talked about college planning and college funding. Oh, by the way, we reviewed the stock option plan and helped you understand when was the most effective time to execute and liquidate some of those options, at the company that you work for. Like, you think about all the great value advisors bring to clients that they don't get directly compensated for. Even if you're in a fee on AUM model, you got to start documenting that and playing it back to the client, because the client may forget all of the great work that the advisor is doing. Because I'm convinced advisors are doing amazing work. They just don't get credit for it. So that's number one. The second thing that I would encourage advisors to really start thinking about, if it came to this, if it came to an advisor having to get the client quarterly to write the check, not deduct it from the account, but actually stroke the check. They've got $1 million of assets. They're charging 1 point on assets. It's a $10,000 fee a year. If the $2,500 a quarter did not come out of the account, but instead the client had to write the check, would they write the check? Would they understand the value that their advisor brought forward? Would they? Now, I don't think anytime soon they're going to have to get to that. But by the way, it is a real hip check to make sure that you are creating value and that you're anchoring value and that the client is perceiving the great work advisors doing around tax mitigation, retirement income distribution strategy, working with the estate attorney, working with the accountant, having a conversation with the kids, funding the college plan, and managing the investments. Like, all of that is amazing. I just say to advisors, get credit for the great work you're doing.
It's interesting. If any of the advisors listening are like me when I was an advisor, my skin would be crawling. When posed with that question, I'd be like, oh no, I don't know if they would be willing to write that check. So it's an interesting perspective to sort of check yourself and make sure that you're delivering an amount of value that's worthy of not just the money, but them spending the time writing that check and having to think about the value that the advisor is providing.
So let's take that, what you just said, and let's make it less scary. Okay. Here's a really simple exercise. If you take your client roster and you pull it out, and under the guise of we've done great job for clients and we're providing a lot of value beyond just the investment management piece, and we're helping clients in lots of ways, restack your clients into one of 4 buckets. This is a client that's a real advocate. Man, they tell people all the time about the great work we do, not just around investment management, but in all the other work we do. So these clients are advocates. Here's a bucket of clients that are engaged. Here are a bucket of clients that are questionable. Man, I don't know if they'd write the check. Not really sure. And here's a group of clients that are at risk. Oh, this group of clients, they'd never write the check. So by bucketing the clients, scale of 1 to 10, 7, 8, 9, those are the ones that are engaged. A 10 is their advocates. A 1, 2, 3, oh my gosh, they're at risk. A 4, 5, 6, yeah, these are the ones questionable. We do this exercise in our coaching program with advisors frequently, and it's a really good, at least once a year, restack, resegment, and look at the clients, not at revenue per client, but look at the clients as an engagement score. how engaged are they? How excited are they to partner, with your firm as an advisor because they're gaining great value? It's not a relationship score. It's an engagement score. And I think that's a good exercise that removes a little of that piece, Dave, of scary land.
I like that. A little bit of a tangent. I'll have to think after this podcast how I could potentially take that and include it into kind of how I help advisors segment their clients as well as like an added, call it data point, because I'm in agreement with you where it's tough to just simply segment clients based on revenue because there's so many other things that you need to consider. So I have folks, rank their clients on a scale of 1 to 5 on a handful of different categories. One is revenue. One is coachability. Do they push back on all your recommendations or do they accept you as the expert? Another one is potential, right? Are they, retired and they're just going to be drawing down their assets or future opportunity? Do they refer folks? And overall likability, right? Do you enjoy seeing their name pop up on your calendar in your inbox? So I may have to add an additional category.
Call it the ClientWise at-risk assessment. That's what we call it.
There you go. Awesome. This next topic that I want to bring up, and I would say that when I was an advisor, if I'm being totally honest and vulnerable, I would fit this category where I would be giving advice that I wasn't necessarily, taking myself as well. I was younger at the time, first time making real money and didn't necessarily plan the way that I should have. And, we had talked about how advisors are so busy managing client relationships and providing that technical advice to them that at times there's a large group of folks out there, advisors, that, as you put it, are the shoemakers in town, but their kids are wearing shoes with holes. So talk through that a little bit. And why do you think that that is the case? And more importantly, how do advisors ensure that they don't fit into that category?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's a lot about the accidental owner. If you think about how many advisors got into the profession, it was because they enjoyed the capital markets. They enjoyed, working with people. They really enjoyed maybe some of the technical side of the business, constructing plans and the like. And the unintended consequence for most advisors is that they bring on lots of new clients and they're really good at what they do. And the unintended consequence of that is, well, now you've got, a book of business or you've got a business, one of the two, and you've got a lot of people that are depending upon you. And the great irony of this industry is that so many advisors are effective at helping clients plan for the future. I mean, if you really boil it down into what the best in the business are great at, it's about preparation for what lies ahead, whether that's retirement income distribution, whether that's financial planning, whether that's risk management, whether that's financial security. I mean, advisors are great at planning for the future. But the great irony is they often fail to plan for their own business future. And I call it the accidental owner. Most advisors, at least that are in business today with an average age in the US at 58 years of age as an industry, is that they got into the profession and maybe weren't thinking about the future so much. They were just thinking about, well, when most got started in the business, it was about survival. Then it was about thriving. And then they just became really successful at serving clients and loved that work. Many didn't take time out to work on the business because they're so busy day to day enjoying working in the business. And so I think that there's a really interesting observation when you look at the data, whether it's Fidelity Institutional, I know Schwab's put out data. I know Barron's puts out data. ClientWise has been selected as the exclusive advisor coaching partner for Barron's Dow Jones, which is a big honor. So we look at some of the data collection and their rankings. We coach many of the top ranked advisors in the US. We look at that data and that data is all pretty consistent. Less than a third of advisors have effectively planned for their succession. And in fact, for those RIAs out there that have to submit in their ADVs an SEC audited and reviewed succession strategy, most advisors, when you kind of pull the curtain back in a confidential coaching session would report that if they had to pull the trigger and run the firm, if there was an accidental and untimely death of a partner or disability of a partner or the retirement of a partner in the firm, most report, more than 2/3 report that there isn't a next successor who's excited about wanting to run the business, acquire the business, buy sell agreements in place. And so succession is a big issue. And I think if we're going to believe that the clients come first and we're acting in the best interest of others, then this industry probably needs to spend a little more time preparing the next generation, building the next generation so that succession really occurs and we can maintain that nobility of the profession. Interestingly enough, I see many advisors paying big attention to this. In fact, it's a big driver in what we do at the Business Builders Academy is help advisors build teams, build businesses. It's not a sales school. It's not, sales coaching. It's how do you build a business? How do you build a team? Interestingly enough, we have something called a merger maximizers, one of our coaching programs, and our merger maximizer coaching has increased substantially with the 33 record quarters of M&A activity happening in the marketplace, because many advisors who are acting in the best interest of clients are recognizing that maybe they don't have the desire, the time, the skill, the will maybe to build out the team, but by partnering with another firm, by merging with another, they can accomplish the same. So we're finding that advisors are getting very smart and really paying close attention, waking up to this issue and saying, hey, clients come first. We got to prepare for the future ourselves and our business.
Let's get a little bit more tactical with that topic. So if I'm an advisor, let's say, I'll use me as an example, right? I'm 31 years old.
Okay.
And I plan to, work until I'm 60, 65. I think to myself, assuming that nothing bad happens along the way, I got plenty of time to figure this out. And I feel like
you're bulletproof and you don't need to worry about it, right?
Exactly.
Why bother? Yeah.
So, it's easy to kick the can down the road. Whereas if I'm, say, in my 50s, perhaps I'm taking it a little bit more seriously. So I have sort of a few-part question. So number one is, when should an advisor start to think about this?
Right now.
Number two, for succession, there's a multitude of different options, right? I could just sell to a larger firm. They, take care of my clients. I could have a protege, so to speak. I could merge, as you alluded to. So how, as an advisor, do I know what the right decision is? And then finally, when do I start to communicate this to my clients?
Oh my gosh,
how does that
great
communication
questions.
go?
These are all really good questions, Dave. I love it. I was joking right now, but I'm not joking right now. Here's how I describe it. The client that walks in that says, retirement income planning, why would I want to worry about a retirement income plan? I'm 31. I'm good. Woo. Hey, I'm just in the, really hitting the stride on income and growing my income. Why would I pay attention? So I'll answer your third question first, which is, when do you start communicating? Start communicating it right now. I mean, what a silly business model it is to serve clients until such time as you don't want to serve clients and you're out and somebody else picks up the mantle and carries it, right? I mean, if you think about it, in your marketing materials, and I'm sure you guys talk a little bit about this at Model FA, is in your marketing materials, you should probably be overtly, explicitly stating, hey, we're building a multi-generational team to serve your family multi-generationally. That's a really simple phrase.
But powerful.
It's fiduciarily oriented. It's client focused. Pun intended here. It's ClientWise. It is really sent, right?
Sometimes I can't help myself either, Ray.
Yeah. Listen, man, I'm telling you, if you put the client first and you say, we're here for you, that means we got to be here for you, not today, but for tomorrow as well. And the best in the business are hiring smart people. They're not lone rangers. They're recognizing that they're leading teams. They're serving clients in a big way. And that's a serious responsibility. So when do you plan on working on succession? It takes a minimum of 7 to 10 years to develop somebody within a team multi-generationally, somebody who has the capital, the desire, the entrepreneurial spirit, the technical skills, the relational skills, who's a cultural fit. it takes time to develop that next gen. Now, so an advisor who's 31, man, you got time. Like you got plenty of time. And you know what? Not everybody you hire is going to work out 100%. So you've got some time and you've got some time to make some mistakes and have some learning and not repeat those mistakes as you get closer, to some transition period. And I'm not going to call it retirement. I'm not going to call it exit. I'm going to call it transition, because I think there's a lot of wisdom in advisors who are 55, 65, 75 years of age. I'm not pushing people out the door. In fact, some of those folks who are longer in their career probably have more experience in the little pinky than most advisors, in their 30s have in that decade. So, how do you attend a wake? What's the appropriate behavior to welcome a widow back into the office to review a plan? What's the appropriate way to talk to a client who's experienced, a job loss? What's the appropriate way to rebalance an investment portfolio when all things are screaming skyrocket? When the mortgage rates start bumping up, how do you help a client, negotiate with the bank? I mean, you think about all the great wisdom that these advisors have, Dave. It's my view that we're not pushing people out, but you've got to think about, number one, what is your time to exit? If it's 5 years or less, well, there's a different set of actions you probably need to take. If it's 5 to 10 years, well, there's a different set of actions you can take. And if you've got more than 10 years to your transition, well, then you've got a whole lot of wiggle room. Start early and be consistent. That's number one. Number two, I would encourage you to think about the lifestyle and the transition and what you want it to be. This is akin to what you do with a client. You don't say to a client, okay, at 65, you don't know whether you want to work to 60. You might want to work to 90. I mean, longevity, you may have a whole lot of things you want to do. I don't know about you, but I'm excited to go back to school, at some point in the future and take some classes, in history or learn some new skills. I mean, I don't think I'll ever stop wanting to learn and grow as a person. Retire means to put down. You look up the definition of retire, it doesn't have a favorable sort of connotation. I think people are going to transition. I think advisors will transition. So what do you want the transition to look like? Maybe your team will hire you back in some capacity to bring some value to the team. Maybe you'll sell a stake of the firm, but what you retain through dilution will actually grow greater in value in what you retain than having retained 100% of it, because you hired the right people to help you grow the thing. So transition what you want that to look like, and designing your future lifestyle. We call that at ClientWise the fully designed future. Let's design the future on what you're really looking for. And then, of course, you got to think about the kind of people you want to surround yourself with and those with whom you want to sell the business and what you might want to extract in terms of enterprise value out of the business. So merging with another, that may be an option, especially if you've got less than 5 years to go and you want to start transitioning and doing things differently. If you've got more than 5 years, then that might look a little bit differently too. You got more options. And so the reality is, if you put the clients first, then you got to take some action. Earlier, the better.
So within that, are you alluding to the preferred method of transitioning is to sort of have that protege or that team to where it's an easy pass off internally as opposed to kind of linking up with a larger firm?
Great question. Yeah. You generally get greater enterprise value and a higher multiple when there's an internal transaction. I mean, not all the time, but the data really points to the fact that if you've got some time on your hands and you can develop a really powerful next gen set of team members, and it typically takes a minimum of 2 or maybe 3 to replace a controlling owner or founder. So when you think about it, if you're an advisor and you've been at this thing for 10 or 15 or 20 years or more, you're probably good at a lot. Like you're good at the investment management, you're good at financial planning, you got good relational skills, good technical skills. You know how to run a P&L, you know how to make payroll. Like you probably have a lot of skill. Well, the business as it grows bigger in size is going to need multiple next gen who have capital, who bring different skills, who can work together to serve a larger client roster. And so on that note, it's going to be really important to think about maybe an internal transition. And as you dilute the number of shares that you own of the business, what you retain should grow in value more so if you select wisely those you sell an equity stake in the firm. Now, if you're at a time or you don't have the desire to want to participate, sometimes a merger makes sense. I just had a client of ours who recognized that he really got it. He's like, man, clients come first. Ray, everything you said, I agree with, but I don't really want to build the team. I don't have the time to build the team. And so he went out and bought a firm, and he bought a firm that had a number of, 35 to 44-year-old kind of folks, and merged them into his organization, acquired them outright, and then manufactured immediately an internal. He had done some joint work with those folks and had done a nice job at collaborating in the marketplace to serve clients jointly. So he had a pretty good couple of year worth of sort of testing the waters a bit. Mm-hmm. And so there was a good strategic fit. When we put them through our 12-week merger maximizer coaching program, we identified where the opportunities lie, and there was a good cultural fit and a good value proposition to client fit. So it's actually worked out quite nicely to see. So lots of optionality, David. There isn't one size fits all, but you're right. An internal transition, if you've got the time, will generally maximize your enterprise value.
And I think to sum that up, because I think we can chat all day, so I want to go to the next segment, but to sum that up, I think the message is your options increase the sooner you do this and the sooner you start thinking about this. And it's important to do it sooner rather than later in order to be able to evaluate what those options may be and give yourself time to really raise up that next person or those next people, or go in a different direction where, mistakes can be made when you're trying to rush through it in the eighth inning, so to speak. So
yeah, well said. That's right.
I appreciate all that. So for this next segment, for those of you who are listening and maybe your first episode, one of the things that I want to promote within our industry is the fact that a lot of advisors love to learn, but oftentimes they can find themselves learning exclusively within the confines of our industry. And there's so many other good resources and books and information from other industries that we can apply to our businesses. And picking the right book, may be a little overwhelming because there's so many out there. So I essentially use this platform and our guests to be able to distill a more refined reading list. So Ray, one of the books that's one of your favorites, I'm sure you have multiple, is Think Again by Adam Grant.
Yes.
Tell me why you picked that book.
Okay, so that's funny. And since we last spoke, I'm going to throw in another book, but we'll come to the war for talent here in just a moment. By the way, here's Adam Grant's book. I'm a big Adam Grant fan, but I'm going to read you Brené Brown, who's one of my all-time favorites. She's got an amazing podcast, by the way, but I'm going to read you her quote, and I think this will sum it up. She says, "This is the right book for right now. Yes, learning requires focus, but unlearning and relearning require much more. They require choosing courage over comfort." Adam Grant weaves together research and storytelling to help us build the intellectual and emotional muscle we need to stay curious enough about the world to actually change it. So I think that's a brilliant way to sum it up. I mean, what Grant does in Think Again is help you think about the power of knowing what you don't actually know. We come to these belief systems and we come to a set of beliefs that are certain based upon life experiences and what we know inside the space in the world with which we operate. I think one of the things that we've learned over the past couple of years is that we're a pretty resilient society. We can actually, shift pretty quickly if we need to. We're a pretty agile group here in the United States. We rebound fast. We can work in new and different ways. I remember in March of 2020, I was busy working with a CEO of a very large publicly traded company who was a client of ours. And he said to me, "Hey, where are you going for the weekend?" And I thought it was an odd question. And he said, "Yeah, I know you own a home, on the East Coast, you own one in Dallas, you own one on the West Coast. Like, where are you headed?" I said, "Well, I'm headed back to my primary residence, which is in Dallas, Texas." He said, "Well, you better be prepared to stay for a few weeks." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, the White House called. They're going to shut the country down because there's this disease that's spreading across the US and it's going to get really serious. We don't know how serious quite yet." And I thought, man, that's the weirdest thing I've ever heard. Like, what are you talking about? And I remember thinking about that. Well, sure enough, by Monday, we had learned about, the COVID-19 and, and the hospitalizations and what was happening in America. And those early days, April, May into June, got pretty scary for a lot of people. And, a lot of people died. And there was a really sad uncertainty and state of affairs and all around the world. And I think about the shifts and the changes we had to make as a business at ClientWise. I mean, we had hotel contracts, all over the US, up into Canada. We're doing work in Australia. And we looked up and went, okay, we got to shift everything virtually. Like, what does that look like? And, advisors jumped right onto the virtual platform. And by the way, it opened up a whole new way of thinking about the potential to connect. I watched so many advisors increase their productivity because now they're doing client meetings vis-a-vis Zoom or some digital platform, Microsoft Teams or WebEx or whatever. I think that's a really interesting example or set of examples about how you can maybe stop, think again. We used to think the belief system was every single client needed a face-to-face client review, and we should get in our cars and drive to their home or office or have them come into our office and sit down. Now, I'm not saying that there's not value in having a cup of coffee and building a relationship. I'm a big believer in all of that. But like Dave, you and I are recording this podcast today in a digital kind of way on a Zoom platform. That might not have happened 3 years ago the way it's happening today. I mean, I can tell you, I wouldn't have the microphone and camera and lighting system that I have today in creating a professional way with which to distribute an important message. So Grant does a really effective job in providing research data that really draws some different kinds of conclusions in helping us shift some mindset and thinking again. As you mentioned in my intro, I hold a master practitioner certification in Neuro-Linguistics, in addition to my Coach Federation credential. And in Neuro-Linguistics, which is really the study of human communication and our belief structures and where we get anchors in our life. And what Grant does, which is really effective, is helping us take a pause, stopping to think about what we hold near and dear and what belief systems serve us well, maybe what belief systems no longer serve us well, and how we can let go of the things that maybe aren't serving us so well to make room for new ways of thinking, new ways of being, so that we can move forward in a more powerful way. And so I think Again is one of the best.
So as an only child, I can be fairly stubborn.
Uh-oh. Hey, Dave, step on the couch here.
I can be fairly stubborn at times, Ray. And I remember when I read that book, similar takeaways as you, but we can get anchored in a certain mindset, and then our RAS takes over, reticular activating system takes over, to then it really just filters all the relevant information based on where you are anchored. And then boom, you have confirmation bias. So I think that in reading that book, one of my main takeaways was to play devil's advocate with yourself, and to try and understand if there's, a different way to look at things. And I'd like to think that I've improved a little bit, but I guess I'll have to ask the people around me to see. But that was a similar takeaway as yours.
That's great. I like listen, as we get older, right? That confirmation bias, that need to anchor that everything we know to be true is true, that can be pretty dangerous if we're not careful. So I think my wife reminds me all the time. She's my think again partner. It's like, hey, wait a minute. Is that true? 28 years later, I've got a great, partner in life helping me think about that. We got to surround ourselves by people bringing us new and different ideas and, staying creative and fresh.
Love it. Well, Ray, I appreciate you joining on the show. A lot of good information that we talked about today. And even though we both serve advisors in similar-ish ways, if your message resonated with folks who are listening to this show and they think to themselves, I wonder what it's like, to work with ClientWise, Ray and his team, where can you send them? What resources do you have that they can take a peek at? How do they find you?
Okay, couple of things. We do have a partnership with Barron's Dow Jones. So if you're a ranked advisor or have submitted for rankings, feel free to reach out to Barron's directly or reach out directly to ClientWise. I would encourage everybody to check out ClientWise.com. There's a right splash on the homepage is a really important question. What is your next ambition? And if your ambition is one of those that exists there, click through, let us know. If your ambition is not listed, let us know. We're very curious to know what your next ambition is as a business owner, as a financial professional. Anybody listening to this podcast who's a financial advisor with a CRD number, you will be offered exclusive access to the ClientWise Exchange, which is the largest practice management platform. Think Facebook for financial advisors, but with practice management content. So we'll offer a complimentary membership into the ClientWise Exchange. Yeah, you got it. And just take time out to check out my book, You've Been Framed, How to Reframe Your Wealth Management Business and Renew Client Relationships. Dave, thanks again for the opportunity to connect with you. Always fun to learn from you as well.
Of course. No, I appreciate that. And for those listening, part of the reason why we're taking more of a collaborative approach here, having Ray and ClientWise sort of offer up services and things like that, is as much as we'd love to work with you at Model FA, what we care about is that you're working with someone. And if our message resonates with you, awesome, let's chat. If Ray's message resonates with you, awesome, go chat. The point here is that you don't have to go about this journey alone. And there's plenty of folks out there like Ray and ourselves who are more than happy to run alongside you. So with that, a lot of value in this show. So we very much appreciate if you could click the share button, share it with a peer of yours. And it would also be super helpful if you wrote us a review on iTunes. And as a result of all the sharing you've been doing and the reviews on iTunes, you've got us to the top 2.5% of all podcasts globally. So very grateful, not just for those actions, but these podcasts are like 45 to 60 minutes. So, very grateful for the time that you're spending with us as well. Without that, we wouldn't get great guests like Ray on the show. So appreciate all of you listening. And Ray, again, thank you so much for joining.
You're welcome.